Okay, no fooling around. This is a really important video to tell you the truth. Over the last 2-3 days, Sergei Shoigu, the Minister of Defense for the Russian Federation, has called, at his initiation, the Secretaries of Defense of the United States and their counterparts in France and the United Kingdom and Turkey. Now, this is officially known. And the subject matter of these conversations is not known specifically, but it is believed that Shoigu said that the Zelensky regime is planning to use a dirty bomb on the territory of Ukraine, that this would be a provocation/escalation. The foreign ministries of France, the United Kingdom, and the United States issued a joint statement saying that they would keep on supporting Ukraine and that these allegations, these Russian allegations, were false, and they insinuated in the joint statement that it was really the Russian Federation that was creating an excuse for escalation. I'll read you the specific joint statement, which is very interesting. We, the foreign ministers of France, the United Kingdom, and the United States, reiterate our steadfast support for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity in the face of Russia's ongoing aggression. We remain committed to continue supporting Ukraine's efforts to defend its territory for as long as it takes. Earlier today, the defense ministers of each of our nations spoke to Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu at his request. Our countries made clear that we all reject Russia's transparently false allegations that Ukraine is preparing to use a dirty bomb on its own territory. The world would see through any attempt to use this allegation as a pretext for escalation. We further reject any pretext for escalation by Russia. The foreign ministers also discussed their shared determination to continue supporting Ukraine and the Ukrainian people with security, economic, and humanitarian assistance in the face of President Putin's brutal war of aggression. End statement. Now, it's highly unusual for these three countries to issue a joint statement like this. And the fact that Shoigu has never before called these individuals over the last several months, and he called them all, one after the other, including Turkey, which was not included in this joint statement. It seems to me that the Russians probably have this evidence cold. They know it. They know it for a fact. It is, if Sergei Shoigu would reach out to these his counterparts at these four nations, there is no question that the Russians have absolute proof, absolute and irrefutable proof. And what the foreign ministers of these three countries are doing is lying. Simple as that. I mean, it's not like they haven't done it before. Shoigu would never put himself out on a limb like that unless they had just absolutely foolproof evidence. Now, yesterday I did a video discussing the 101st Airborne Division's deployment in Romania, and also the maneuvers going on of the Polish-Lithuanian army on the border with Belarus. And I blue-skied maybe that this is some sort of fist that they're preparing to hit the Russians, on the Belarusian border or something like that, or the Ukrainian border. But now it seems to me that if what Sergei Shoigu is saying, that the Zelensky regime is preparing a dirty bomb that they are going to detonate on their own territory, which I believe, then it seems reasonable that the intent would be Nikolaev. Nikolaev is one of the coastal cities of Ukraine on the Black Sea. It's between Kherson and Odessa. And this escalation and the fact that Nikolaev has been evacuated of civilians, well, it would seem reasonable to infer that they plan to set off this dirty bomb in Nikolaev, and the West use that as a pretext to deploy the 101st Airborne Division in Odessa. Because if you look at a map, there is Kherson, further west is Nikolaev, and farther still is Odessa. Now, Odessa has historically is a very important city to the Russians. It's important for historical reasons, It's important for religious reasons, cultural reasons. It is a jewel that the Russians have deliberately not harmed, except in targeting specific military assets that have been there. Now, it's very clear that the Zelensky regime forces are at the very end of their tether. There has been a lot of talk from different sources that, in fact, the number of dead Zelensky regime forces numbers in the six figures, over 100,000 dead, and perhaps 1.5 to 2 times that number of wounded, incapacitated. So basically, as Brian Berletic over at the New Atlas has been saying for a while now, the Zelensky regime forces are at their end. And so, in desperation, the Zelensky regime would use this dirty bomb in Mykolaiv, and this would give the excuse for the Americans to deploy in Odessa. And this would escalate the war into a full-on NATO versus Russia war. I think it was very smart of the Russians to come out with this and say openly that this is what the Zelensky regime is planning to do. I think it is despicable what the Zelensky regime is planning to do, because I will say here, and I don't care, there is no doubt in my mind that this is true. And it really, really scares me. I mean, through this whole conflict, this is the one time I have to say that I'm truly scared. Because detonating a dirty bomb, quite apart from creating an environmental catastrophe on Mykolaiv, as a military matter, it will do nothing. Okay, it will just make a big mess, though it should be pointed out that because of this, it would be very difficult for the Russians to advance on Odessa. Because, of course, the coastal roads from Kherson to Mykolaiv on to Odessa would make it extremely difficult for the Russians to advance. It would create a nightmare, and of course a political nightmare. And of course it would draw in the United States. The United States would have the perfect excuse to help a friendly nation. This is the October surprise. This is being done strictly for American electoral purposes, insofar as using a dirty bomb. I had been hearing talk about a dirty bomb for a couple of months at least, but I didn't give it that much credence until now. Now, of course, since the very get-go of this conflict, the Zelensky regime has had the possibility to create a dirty bomb. Because, of course, they have nuclear reactors, and they have the fissionable material. They do potentially, in theory at least, have the technological capacity to make an actual nuclear weapon. But insofar as making a dirty bomb, they certainly have that ability. Insofar as actually making a nuclear weapon, I think it would be, as a theoretical matter, possible, but as a practical matter, really impossible, because the Russians would probably bomb any facility actively trying to do this. I think that part of this missile offensive that the Russians have been carrying out over the past 2 weeks has been to target the potential sectors or installations where they might be assembling a dirty bomb. But I have to reiterate, there is no doubt in my mind that this is real. This is as real as it gets. Sergei Lavrov just gave a statement that I listened to about, he was reacting to the joint statement of the foreign ministers of the United States, the UK, and France. He didn't seem to be saying much, but just basically reiterating what Shoigu was saying, and of course that they had proof. I think that that's the key issue. They have proof. This is real. And I think that I have to go back to the same thing I said just now. I think it's despicable. It is the most despicable thing, and it's desperation. Simple, plain and simple. Because NATO and the Zelensky regime know that they are losing. They are losing badly on all fronts. Economic, political, geopolitical, insofar as the other great nations, China, India, the global south, they are losing economically, and they are losing militarily. They have thrown everything but the kitchen sink at Ukraine to fight off the Russians, and they have lost. Every offensive has been a disaster. Because remember, You don't fight to win territory, you fight to defeat the opposing army. If you destroy the opposing army, that's how you win. And the Russians have been doing that systematically. And as the numbers have come out now that show catastrophic losses on the Zelensky regime side, it's pretty obvious that there is about to be a huge breakthrough, and in their panic and desperation, the West, Washington, the people at the State Department, the usual suspects, Anthony Blinken, Victoria Nuland, all of these people want a Samson solution. The self-destruction of Ukraine and a pretext for the Americans to go in and fight against the Russians directly. This is a catastrophe. I mean, I truly cannot emphasize this enough. We're just going to have to wait and see what happens. In my own case, if you're wondering, I'm far, far away from Nikolaev, and so nothing will happen to me, I hope at least. But there's other things too that's been going on. There have been a lot of talk from different troops that they are Zelensky regime troops, that they are getting chemical, biological, and nuclear protection gear and Geiger counters. This is as real as it gets. This is actually happening. I mean, all of these data points add up to this being absolutely true. The foreign ministers of the United States and the United Kingdom and France are lying through their teeth when they say that this is just some sort of pretext that the Russians have conjured up out of thin air. And I mean, I really am at a loss for words, to tell you the truth. And I'm not kidding. I've never been this scared. This is truly a catastrophe if this happens. And it's not so much that the Americans will deploy their 101st Airborne Division in Odessa. It's just going to be a swirling whirlpool. It'll just suck in everything, all the armies of NATO, for a full-on war on the battlefield of Ukraine. And this country that has suffered enough, it will be decimated like nothing before ever. And so I have to say that I'm truly scared for the first time in this conflict, that this entire country will be just absolutely annihilated if the Americans proceed with their grotesque and despicable plan. Because ultimately, I blame the Americans. The Americans. They're behind this bullshit. And I have to say outright and openly, they are evil. It's not more complicated than that. They are evil, grotesque people. And I hope that at some point in the future, the people responsible for this are tried, for this is a crime against Ukraine and a crime against humanity. This is evil, what they are doing. Sorry, I'm a little bit bent out of shape by this, but as you can imagine, I'm at a loss. I cannot believe that these people would be so evil to pursue this, but they are. And anybody who tells you otherwise, anybody who tells you that this is a Russian false flag or some nonsense like that, they are lying. Know it. Know what's going on.